We are now coming to the final session of this conference, the session on results and recommendations. And you see already at the table that there are the representatives of the panels. We have, of course, combined two panels, 2 and 3 and 1 and 4, so there you have only one speaker. And we have added a sixth one, which was an event which took place actually at the first day of the conference, the so-called Space Up, where students actually talked together and about various subjects, and you will also hear about the results of this. But first of all, I would like to really thank very much all the speakers in the panels. They have been really doing a fantastic job, and I think we all have to applaud them once again in order to thank them for their contributions. The subject was, of course, enormously broad, from governmental programs to entrepreneurial actions, I think, but we nevertheless covered most of the subject. Of course, in some areas it was just a scratch on the surface, and it will certainly be worthwhile to continue it. And Monsieur Dordain, the Director General of ESA, even wanted to have the conference a bit broader. When he made his opening speech, he said, "I'm very pleased that you call it GLIC and not GLICs." So he expected to speak about global innovation only. And of course, we have also added the space, but nevertheless, there were a number of aspects which were related to general innovation support. So the panels itself, they were very disciplined, and we have now the pleasure of actually summarizing the whole thing. I will do it a little bit different than in the panels. We will ask the moderators to present their findings and results, 5 minutes per panel, and then we will have a bit of a discussion with you where you can come in with your comments and tell us whether you are happy with the results and findings and recommendations, or whether you want to add something or you want to criticize something. But there is also opportunity for you to come in with your comments. In that context, I would like to invite Mr. Niels Eldering, who speaks about panel 1 and 3, to open our afternoon session with his presentation.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'd like to start with panel 1, which was actually moderated by Mr. Frank Salzgeber. He could not be here himself at the moment, because at the moment he's already on his way with startup companies who have to pitch, and he's going to support them. So that's also what comes with the job. Panel 1, the view from the entrepreneur. One thing which stood quite up is that it's the right time for entrepreneurs now, in and outside of the space sector, to engage with space. And this is also due to the availability of improved satellite navigation infrastructure. It's there, Galileo is working, people can make use of it. And there's also other technologies, non-space technologies, which enable more and more use for entrepreneurs of space. If you think about a cloud-based system to deal with the vast amount of data coming from Earth observation satellites, this is one of the technologies, the cloud, which enables entrepreneurs to do much more with space than we did before. What is also important is that the support tools and frameworks, they are there. Also, according to some of the entrepreneurs, it's actually where we have to put part of our investment. It's not only about investment in the entrepreneurs themselves, which obviously is very important, but it's also to allow for a framework in which startup companies can actually flourish. And that is actually indicated by the entrepreneurs themselves, that they really would like to see investment in this kind of support. Think also about trainings and these kind of things. Then, during the discussion, it also went a little bit into the direction, what about going into space as a young venture. And there one of the findings was that the space community, the established space community, should also embrace the newcomers, the rising stars, and value also the experience they bring to the table from outside the space sector. And this also means that an older and a younger generation in what we call space sector should mix more and learn from each other. So the basic recommendations coming out of this is the support to internationalize startups. Often it turns out startups feel a little bit alone in their country or continent, and it's difficult to attach also to the international space industry. And that's of course where we as established space industry and agencies can help. Also to support cooperation possibilities with the bigger and established industries part of this to generate this internationalization. Also sharing academic research to make it more accessible also to startup and entrepreneurs is an important step into that direction. Another point, already a little bit discussed in the previous slide, is that we have to keep investing and increase business plan and legal trainings for entrepreneurs to really get them skilled in those abilities. Some entrepreneurs, of course, don't need it. They have already track records or a lot of experience. But others, they need it, and we should make it available to them. There was also a discussion on the funding, that startup funding should be more adapted to the complexity of a space industry. If you as a startup company want to get to a certain readiness level in the technology, you really need support, but you also need funding. And the funding is maybe not entirely optimized for this kind of challenge, as opposed to an industry who is established and is well known how to play the game in space. And last, what is also important is that we also, let's say as established space industry, have to look a little bit at ourselves and have to really recognize and focus more on the technology and the market potential the startups offer. It's not the size of the company or the track record which is always that important. And what we see all too often is that it is difficult for new and small companies, for instance, to engage into a tendering procedure. And because you don't have a track record or you're very small, it becomes difficult for them to join in bigger tenders. And we should say, well, regardless how long they're already around, these are startups, they have a fantastic technology, they have a fantastic market potential, and that's why we're going to invest with them, not because they belong to the establishment or have a long track record. So that's basically the main findings, and later on in the question, please, we can come back to that. Then in the fourth section, panel, actually follows neatly in panel 1, because one of the points in panel 1 was indeed that the entrepreneurs really like to see also investments going in the support tools we provide to startup companies. And basically that was also the topic of the fourth panel yesterday, the non-financial assistance to venture creation. It was a big panel. We discussed actually much more than only the non-financial assistance to venture creation. But I'd like to zoom a little bit back to that, to the points which were really related to that topic. And one of the things which we have seen again is the use of things like hackathons. Events where people come together, they stir up their place with ideas, they require resources to support them in their idea generation. And this is a fantastic tool in the ad hoc assistance to find people and unlocking their talents, their entrepreneurial talents. By the way, I hope you noted in your agenda, Act in Space, one of these hackathons, will again commence in May 2016. So you really want to already pencil that in to join these. And there are other initiatives, the ESA App Camps organized by the ESA BICS, the Startup Village organized by the Skolkova Foundation. These are all examples of hackathons. Another way to mobilize the community and to activate the talents and also to provide the support which they need to further foster those talents, are competition. It's a tremendous important to assist people with ideas to go for that idea and to generate publicity and to demand support. And competitions is a very good way to really get out there and show your idea to the world and demand assistance and also the non-financial assistance from that world around you, from that community around you. The European Satellite Navigation Competition will have a ceremony in October, of which I really would also pencil, you should also pencil that in your agenda, and the new rounds for that competition start in April 2016. Incubators, we also talked about incubators, and by default incubators are at the service of startup companies, offering coaching support, assistance to young entrepreneurs to bring out their talents, offer business plan support and training tools, and provide access to capital sources. Again, even though it was not the topic of the session, but of course capital stays important as a lifeblood of young organizations. And at the end it's also the community, which is an assistance, a non-financial assistance to startups, because together, and this is what we often say, an incubator is not only for entrepreneurs, but an incubator is also something by entrepreneurs, the community which helps each other. A younger entrepreneur can learn from an older entrepreneur. That also is a non-financial assistance. Agencies, we also had the GSA on our panel, and actually it was quite important what Gary was mentioning, because also there the non-financial assistance can be found in ensuring the receptiveness of the market, by ensuring that the markets are well informed about the solutions and the technology startup companies have for sale. And that's something where governments and agencies can support in, to make sure that that information reaches the market. So the recommendations from that session, it's on the same slide. So the recommendation of that session is, let's say, we also had our keynote speaker, and he clearly emphasized that there are ingredients for successful venture creations. People, talents, capital, and community. But without a good toolbox, without tools that can assist and make those ingredients really into a venture, we cannot do anything. And panel one, the previous panel, clearly demonstrated that entrepreneurs like to see investments also go into these assessment tools, and go into incubators and go into this form of support. JAXA, the ESA BICS, CNES, economical clusters like the Skolkova region and Albuquerque, they all are actually also an incubator which offer these assistance tools to the companies. And our focus should be investing in those toolboxes and to scale them and to capitalize on those toolboxes. And the last point in the recommendation is also the notion, and this was brought also to our attention during the discussion from the audience, that it has to be very clear that we also have to go a step beyond, involve industry more in what is a usually governmental effort. Incubation often are governmental initiatives, and we should involve industry, also the matured industry, more and more, and to together offer a toolbox. And actually the first step in doing that has already been taken. The ESA BIC establishment in Ottobrunn in collaboration with Airbus, and we should seek more and more these kind of support and these kind of collaboration in supporting startups. So agencies and industries offering a toolbox as a joint venture, and that is what we should invest in. Thank you very much.
So the floor is now yours. You have any comments or recommendations to Mr. Eldering's results and findings? If there is none, maybe I start again being the icebreaker. Mr. Eldering, we have learned during the conference that most of the value-added elements are coming in from the downstream market. And what you refer to is very much to the space agencies and incubators which are related to them. But how do you think we can get best hold of this downstream market? What kind of instruments do we need in order to convince this area to also do more for entrepreneurship?
Well, in that sense, I believe it's important when we talk about involving industry, we not only mean the space industry. I think it would be good to also involve the non-space industry. What can we do together with the Siemens, which could be a potential customer for a startup company, or the Bosches of this world? So my recommendation would be to not only seek collaboration with the space industry, but also to seek collaboration with the non-space industry, because in the end, these are also customers to which startup companies may be supplying.
Okay, thank you very much.
I see questions.
Herr Stöber. Hier ist er. Ah, yeah, it's coming.
Ladies first. Oh, thank you. So polite in Germany. So I have a question. We've talked a lot about improving and expanding some of the existing programs that are here in Germany and that we have in America to provide services for entrepreneurs that are already here. Does the panel have any recommendations for more demand gen opportunities? So things that would either be early training, either at the school level, university level, or as was discussed and brought up by John last night, maybe for people mid-career, in order to help foster a deeper community of entrepreneurs for people who maybe are not aware of the community.
Yes, basically what you're indeed saying is it's about bringing out the talents. I try to be short in this answer because it's a super interesting question. We learned, for instance, from John Freisinger that if you have an asset, you actually kind of force people to consider becoming an entrepreneur if they have the talent for it indeed, and let's not get into the definition of that. But if you have an asset which is interesting, like in his case, it was of course the nuclear plant over there, and that motivated people to do something with nuclear, or the spin-offs of nuclear energy. So you can have a huge carrot, a huge asset to actually, the German word would be entlocken. I have no clue what this would be in English, but to challenge people to let's say the nascent entrepreneur to be awakened and then to take the challenge. That's one way of doing it. I think this is important, and that is what we should always do. Galileo, in that sense, is also an infrastructure which is very tempting. That was the word I was looking for. Tempting to be used by entrepreneurs to do something more business-wise with it. Yet, on the other hand, and that's also an element of your question, it's also about training, preparing people to actually do something with that talent. And yes, one of the initiatives, and that's also partly what we do as an agency, is we organize every year with the Global Lines of Management Education, SAMS, a course of 1 week in which business students get a space technology and they have to change it into a business plan, a competitive business plan, and then deliver it to the owner of the technology, which is either industry or it's ESA itself. And this way we mobilize actually the business community, the young business community, to take notion of space and of entrepreneurship. Now, most of these bright students, they will not become entrepreneurs. They will be probably tempted by a nice contract by McKinsey, or become a banker, or go somewhere else. But they have people around them who might be entrepreneurial, if it's not themselves. And I think that's really something we have to work on. It's not only about targeting the direct entrepreneur who will be the entrepreneur of tomorrow, but it's also to create a community in which others, enthusiasts, others to become entrepreneurs. So it's more complicated than just providing education. Is that a good enough answer, or is this actually too long answer? It's okay. Yes.
Okay, then we have a last question. I'm sorry, we have to limit a little bit, Mr. Stöber.
First, this report which you presented is a little bit tinted by the aspect of the BICs. And the BICs are a super success story, no question about it. But if you look at it from the point of view of space agencies in general, there's many avenues in which innovation is being stimulated and also entrepreneurship is being stimulated. all of the meteorological services around the world, for example, are typical examples of entrepreneurial transfers from the side of agencies, be that NASA to NOAA or be that ESA to the World Meteorological Organization, UMETSAT or others. On the telecommunications side, it is infrastructure provided by, in part only, by the space agencies, but the whole market is a huge entrepreneurial market of commercial dimensions which are very, very large. So the point I want to make is there's several dimensions in this game that need to be considered as a full spectrum of actions that need to be taken by agencies, including the question of where agencies can be effective in this game and where they're very limited, because also there is a key question to be asked.
Can I offer a comment on it?
Yes, a quick one.
A quick comment. I thank you very much for this remark, because you're absolutely right on this. We've seen also an example of JAXA. They also deploy multiple technology transfer tools. And we do it also at ESA. There's the incubation program, but the incubation program would perhaps be not so successful if we not also had a technology transfer network and an IPR portfolio. So everything works together. And there's one remark I really want to make, because you mentioned that actually the space industry is quite entrepreneurial. And I really want to also give credit for that, because let's not forget, to my opinion, our business incubation centers, we use a normal procurement methodology for our ESA bids. And often the space industry is criticized that, oh, everything takes so long in the tender system. But we use the same system for startup companies. So I'm tempted to say that without the history in which space industry resulted into EUMETSAT, into Inmarsat, into all these organizations, we also would not have now an incubation approach for startup companies. It's inherited in the DNA of how in Europe space has arisen. Yes.
Okay, thanks again for your reply. We are now calling up the second speaker this afternoon. It's Mr. Ken Davidian, who will talk to you about his findings and recommendations on panel 2 and 3.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. And for those of you who weren't here yesterday, my name's Ken Davidian. I work at the FAA Office of Commercial Space Transportation. For those of you who were here yesterday, hello again. And, that's very funny. Oh, no, maybe I do this. Okay, I didn't realize I had animation here. Hi. So just as a recap of the overall conference, this is the structure, I guess, that we built the conference around. The main three dimensions of the likelihood to enterprise are the government policies and procedures that lead to the opportunity to enterprise, the socioeconomic conditions that lead to the propensity to enterprise, and the entrepreneurial and business skills that lead to the ability to enterprise. These three together, taken together, lead to a greater likelihood to enterprise, along with financial assistance and non-financial assistance lead to a greater likelihood of new venture creation. So this was the basic model that Dr. Devi Niyawali talked about yesterday. And as you'll notice, we had one panel on each of these 5 dimensions. So we wanted to take an overall look at entrepreneurship in general and new venture creation in general, taking a little slice of each one. I don't know about you, but sometimes when I go to a museum, after 2 hours or 3 hours, I overdose and I can't take it anymore. One panel on private capital, venture capital is perfectly fine with me. One panel on tech transfer and non-financial assistance was perfectly fine with me. If we were talking about rocket engines, we could talk all day and I would be there. But on these sort of things, I think a little bit of each is very good. So what I want to do is talk a little bit about the 2 panels that I helped put together, which are panel 2 and 3. Panel 2 is on socioeconomic conditions, and of course we had the keynote speech by Devi Niyawali that went over how we generated the original paper for this, created this framework. And then he talked a little bit about co-opetition and how that comes into play, and I'll touch upon that in a little bit. But basically we had 4 speakers. First was Claire Joly from OECD, and I thought her talk was very interesting because they had laid out a list of what the different factors were that hamper innovation, and they showed how these differed from small to medium to large firms. And also, she talked about how the data could be used to be an important tool for policymaking. It was interesting. She showed how the barriers in many, many countries, the OECD countries, over the last 10 years, how the barriers to entrepreneurship have all fallen in all the countries that they've taken stock of. Alex McDonald from NASA headquarters, who's the head of the Emerging Space Office, he basically talked about 3 different environments: the cultural, the motivational, and the patronage environments. And he challenged us to think about how do you shape the cultural and motivational environments to take advantage in the shift of the patronage environment. And again, talking about now is the time. Money is starting to flow in the United States, at least. So how do you change the cultural and motivational environments? How do you make it more interesting for folks to take up entrepreneurship as a career path? And what kind of carrots do you provide to help stimulate that activity? Dimitri, I hit a carriage return in there somehow. Dimitri Paysan from ORKK spoke about how at present public support for Russia is very much in favor of the large government space programs, the big battalions. And they're a little less favorable of small entrepreneurs still. So there's still an inherent wait and see attitude to see what happens there. And I get the impression, and you can correct me if I'm wrong when we get to the discussion part, whether or not it's maybe the same sort of feeling in Europe. The entrepreneurs, there's a lot of activity going on here, and even in the space sector and entrepreneurship, they haven't won over the venture capitalists, the private capital sector, to start supporting them. Although the government is, I think, doing a great job in demonstrating their support. Gail Allen from NASA headquarters absolutely tied the framework into the ISS, International Space Station, talking about the opportunity has been presented, but through the creation of the ISS and international collaboration, the ability to get there has been developed through the commercial transportation system, orbital transportation system. So now we need to get the propensity dimension ramped up by creating a market, by defining the values, tangible and intangible, to others through socioeconomic factors of public embracement and small business involvement. So that's kind of what we talked about, and I'll get to some recommendations at the end of the after I talk about panel 3. In panel 3, Mike Simpson was the moderator, and he talked about understanding risk, intermediate cash flows, talent identification, empowerment training, and horizon stretching, thinking toward the next goal and the next goal, not stopping. Because it's true that larger, even entrepreneurial organizations, they have a great idea, they set it up, they create a market for it, they start selling it, and then they stop the major innovations. They start incremental innovation. They start doing smaller and smaller improvement innovations, is what Gerhard Mensch called it. You make it a little bit better. They eke out some more performance. And they sort of get away from stretching toward the new horizon. They stay within the field because they want to take advantage of their original innovation for as long as possible. So Mike Simpson talked about horizon stretching, going toward the next basic invention. Devi Niyawali was also on the panel, and he talked about training, financial support, and getting help to entrepreneurs once they've started. So not just kicking off the idea, getting the business started, but once they've got it started, helping them through the intermediate aspects of their job. There are absolute liabilities of newness. There's the barriers to new firms. When they start up, there's a thing called a liability of newness. They're very small, they don't have political connections, they don't have a lot of capital, and so helping them get over those initial liabilities of newness help them have a higher rate of success, and that's what incubators are very good at doing. And what Debbie was saying is that they even need help when they get to the liabilities of adolescence, and there's also liabilities of age, and so they need help at every step of the way. Alessandro Golka from Skoltech talks about how they focus on the needs close to the downstream users. And I think this is something that Walter Peters ended up talking about as well. But they focused on downstream needs. And so this is ways to to attack markets that are better well known, less market uncertainty, and try to bring something to the users that can be immediately used. Scott Hubbard from Stanford focused on the T-shaped person. I'm trying to remember the design school that they had. It had a name for it, D-School they called it, where they bring folks in from a bunch of different disciplines, and they have them work together and rub shoulders and cross paths. And so they try, again, to come up with end-user-centric solutions, balancing the creativity and execution tension. And he talked about this with Procter & Gamble, I think it was, where bringing R&D and production closer together to get away from a valley of death where invention and innovation are sort of separated, because it's really hard to turn knowledge into a product. It turns out that's a really hard thing. So trying to put those two worlds together was also helping to bridge that gap. And then Walter Peters, I thought this was interesting. There's a lot of interesting aspects of space, and we're all space nuts, or most of us are, except that economic guy. Walter Peters talked about how they've been focusing their education on the places that need people, and the government agencies aren't hiring as much anymore because of budget constraints, so they're really focusing their education on developing the entrepreneurial aspect, so make these valuable employees to the markets, whether it's large telecoms or the remote sensing or Earth observation, more end user aspect of it, making them valuable potential employees to those markets. So I thought that was really interesting. So let me go to the conclusions and recommendations. So number one, culture is very, very important. I think we heard this also in the financial panel this morning. They were one of the messages that rang true with me was they were saying finance is very, venture capital is very local. You want to talk to the people in your own language. You want to be able to go visit them. Even though we're in this global economy, the VCs here in Europe really want to stay close to home. And so I think that's something that's important at highlighting that culture is a very important factor. And also cultural differences toward entrepreneurship, whether we glorify the entrepreneur, as we tend to do in the United States these days, that changes over time, or we play it down as much. They're not trusted as much in society. So there's absolute cultural differences, and there's cultural effects on all those entrepreneurial dimensions that I showed before. But again, one of the major conclusions that I got out of the talks, and we heard it also just a couple seconds ago, now is the time. Things are actually happening. There is a knee happening in the curve, and maybe it's going to happen at different times in different parts around the globe. But sometimes you hear the financial community characterized as a bunch of lemmings, where if one lemming jumps off the curve, then a couple others will start jumping, and then everybody starts jumping. It's called the smart follower strategy. There's absolutely a strategy for this. I mean, who wants to be the lead, the lead user? They're going to take all the arrows and barbs. They're going to make all the mistakes. A smart follower will come through, and they'll pay attention to what's going on. They'll adopt the successful aspects of what the leader was doing, and not do what didn't work. And so that's kind of the way the VC community acts, and we're starting to see that, I think, in the U.S., and so maybe it'll catch on over in other parts of the world after that. So, and then, private capital markets are very active. So the next steps, the recommendations, and this is where we absolutely need you to participate, because I think out loud. I need to talk about it. So this is just what I came up with in 10, 15 minutes of scratching my head. So, but if you guys can have other conclusions that you took away from these panels, please let us know. Number one is, I wrote it as, I love you, please don't change, don't change for me kind of thing. The cultures are unique in themselves. At first you might think, how can we change the culture to make it better, to copy someone else? I was reading a story about, I think it was about the steel industries in Japan and the U.S. And in the steel industry in Japan, it was more collaborative. They were presidents of the companies were meeting on a weekly basis with the ministry. They were having all these discussions, knowing what's going on in terms of demand and in terms of technical problems. And in the U.S., that doesn't happen, because why? It's against the law. So we just have legal barriers to doing things, whereas there's some advantages to doing it the way your culture kind of leads you, and there's other advantages, there's disadvantages to taking your culture's route as well. But the basic thing is it's your culture. It's going to be, very, very difficult to change unless there's a real concerted effort, and it's very improbable. So embrace your culture, figure out what the strong points are, and adopt those, and adopt the best methods. For example, I'm trying to get 9 universities to play together as a technology consortium. And it's they might believe in it, but their universities don't believe in it. Sharing IP, no way. Whereas that's absolutely, I think you can, William Boehmel wrote a bunch of equations to show how, it makes a lot of sense to share technology and to license it and to work off of each other. And you don't increase just innovation, but you increase the rate of innovation. Who doesn't want that? Well, but now you've got to give up your personal secrets, and they don't want to do that in the United States as much. We're very individualistic. Second thing, the second recommendation I would say is continue doing the research, continue making these types of presentations, continue having these discussions. There's a lot to learn, like I said, from the steel industry. We're not a special industry. We're really, really not. And so the more we learn about these other industries, and it's not just transportation modes either. You've got to look at the histories of these industries, draw as many analogies as you can, do the lessons learned, and start moving forward from there. I think having this type of discussion is very useful, and I appreciate and I thank the IAF for being willing to have a discussion like this on a set of topics that, we're not sitting up here talking about ISP of rocket engines, and we're not talking about, Mars bases and stuff. We're talking about the actual how do you generate wealth from the great amount of invention that all the government space agencies have generated. So it's a very, very difficult thing to do, and hopefully by talking about it we can make our way toward the finish line and actually accomplish it. So that's all I have, and really, really please, please, please help us and tell us what your recommendations would be. Thank you very much.
So, Ken, to say it in your words, I like you as you are. Please stay like
please
you are.
Don't
I would have liked to take your first view graph at the very beginning to set the scene. But I didn't want to pinch your intellectual property.
No, you can have it. I don't care. Give it away.
But nevertheless, my recommendation would be at the beginning of this recommendation chapter in the proceedings, you should put this chart in order to set the scene so everybody knows what we were talking about.
Yeah. It won't help. It gives the big picture of what's going on.
Okay. Any questions to Ken Davidian?
Alessandro.
Please go ahead.
Actually, well, thank you for a great summary. I just wanted to share a question I was asked yesterday by this gentleman here, a student, which is very interesting. So, we, in a sense, we teach how to, be an entrepreneur, or we try to. But do we teach how to fail?
Who teaches what?
How to fail, failure. Well, in a sense,
how to teach failure.
How to cope with failure?
Yeah, how to cope with
right, and how to experience. It's not just for students; it's also for want to be entrepreneurs. Many people don't do this because they're afraid to fail.
Yeah, no,
and they don't know it's okay to fail.
Yeah, you're talking about resilience. What in the United States I think we call resilience. I don't, and I am not. What the heck do I know, right? I'm a government employee, so I don't know I don't even know if that's teachable. And I'm probably, I'm pulling stuff out of my back pocket here. So, does anybody think you can teach resilience?
Well, maybe not resilience, but you were talking about failures, right?
How do you come back from them?
How you come back from them? Yeah.
How do you gracefully?
There's actually a Dutch entrepreneur. I'm not sure he's still alive actually. Bert Twaalfhoven, and he founded the European Foundation for Entrepreneurial Research, and he has he written a book about his 30 failures. He set up 50 companies. He failed 30 of them. And he goes around the world telling about the failures and how you.
So he's saying based on research, use research. And so the foundation he mentioned, Kaufman Foundation in the U.S., which is focused on entrepreneurship, these would be sources of research for that, I guess. Do you have a? Okay. No.
One more question? Yes, please, go ahead.
So I kind of have a completely different take on that. I think there are things that you can learn that cannot be taught. Flying an airplane, riding a bicycle. I can learn how to do that, but as a flight instructor's job is just to make sure that the student doesn't kill themselves, right? The thing that teaches failure is failing. Reading about failure is useful, but a sense I come away with, and then I was going to make this comment later, your chart and the ecosystem is perfect, except it's all the nouns. It's like we're trying to figure out, we all want cake, and so we need flour, we need eggs, we need water, we need butter, we need a kitchen, we need an oven. We can invest in a better kitchen because we'll probably get a better cake. But the baking of a cake is not autocatalytic. The ingredients don't just assemble themselves. You have to put a human in there to make something happen. So I think this is really about learning by doing. That's why I liked many things that I heard about the Stanford lab and about the work that you do, where you throw people in and you make them do. You don't make them read about it or listen about it. You make them do. 10,000 hours of practice on a guitar makes you a guitar player. A Fender Stratocaster and a big arena does not. And so I would like us to think about how do we actually do more? Because I think for where we are, we have enough ingredients. We may want more later, but we need to think about how we work on the verbs and not just the nouns. That's my comment. Thank you.
It kind of brings up the topic of education versus training, which is good. And obviously, I think the only way to teach entrepreneurship ultimately is to do it. And that's what I think Skolkovo does a good job doing. It pushes them into that process. And that's really good. I think there is a real argument to be made for the research, however. And I think the way it comes in, from my perspective, is I work for the government. And the government, NASA primarily, is investing a lot of money into this commercial sector. And how do they make the decisions to do that? There's a cognitive process based on their personal experiences. They're going to make decisions, make estimations of decisions in the future, assuming that the future is a repeat of the past. But to get beyond that, you've got to realize there's all this research that's been done in these topic areas, and that information should at least be part of the decision-making process from the government. And because if they get called in front of their overlords and say, why did you make this decision, they should be able to at least say, we have read the articles. It may not have, we maybe didn't make the decision they would have made, but at least we considered it. So as somebody that's spending taxpayers' money, I think we're obliged to have uncovered all the research and considered it. Because right now I don't know if we necessarily do that, but I think we're making a good effort at it. And so this is why I keep pushing for the research side. But you're absolutely right. The training aspect and the doing without it, it's totally academic.
I share this very much. I think make them do it and not read it and listen to it, but make them do it. That is really the secret. So thank you very much for that section. I would now like to call Dr. Kroppe, who speaks about the summary and the recommendations of his panel on financial support for new ventures.
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank Mr. Higuchi that we had the chance under the umbrella of the International Astronautical Federation to join this conference here, and also thanks a lot to Mr. Feichtinger and his team who they did a great job to organize all this, and also thank you to Mr. Feustel-Büchel who kept the Bavarian, guided us to this conference and kept the Bavarian flag flying here in this space conference. And also thanks to Mr. Klaus Hermanns, who supported the DLR activities very much during the last weeks and had a lot of to do during this time. So thanks to all of them, and I think we will. I'm very happy about this conference, and I think it was worth coming here to Munich and discuss all these things. I would like to give you an impression of our panel. What's this? Next. The moderator was Professor Sott. He has no space background. He is professor in the IC Business School in Spain and professor in Navarra University. All the others have a space background or are active in the field of space. Uli Fricke is a venture capitalist. Amnon Ginati is from ESA and also talked about the links between ESA and the European Investment Fund and European Investment Bank. Pierre Godard from Airbus covers the field of corporate finance, which is quite interesting field. And Mr. Matsura from covers the field for the agencies, coming from JAXA in Japan. And Rachel Villain covers the field of, she had conducted a study over the new businesses and gave some general inputs and a global view on our subject. The results on the point of view of Mr. Sott were quite interesting. He as a not coming from the field of space, he said it was fascinating for him was the global game we are playing here, and this global perspective of our business. And what he says, there are so many opportunities for new businesses. And his recommendation is to support this ongoing process of change, and that there is an active role for the agencies. Our main subject during the first part of our discussion was finance and markets, of course. And although in the discussions yesterday there were some remarks that there is enough money on the table, but there's still a big gap between the investors on the one hand side, or the wealthy families and so on, and the young and elder engineers who want to run their business and start running their company and so on, or financing growth of their company. And there's still a gap, and we have to discuss how we organize away from the money coming from the investors to the innovative companies. And what was quite interesting was the presentation of Professor Sott, because he explained that financing is not an event, this is a process. And that a lot of young companies start, he mentioned one example from Israel. There were a young team, they want to build machines. And the finance people said, oh, no, that's not a good idea. You enter a market with hard competition, and in the end, they started as a company giving licenses. It's a total different business case, but if they would have insisted in being financed to produce machines, it would be a failed company. But this licensing company, that is a good business case. So it's a process, and it's not a process to get money, it's a process to find strategic partners. And another sentence was, financing follows strategy, and so everybody has to have a key message to the investor. And again, and another sentence was, money follows success. So every ministry, every agency, every regional entity, they have to talk about their success cases, their success stories. And this question, this point was discussed after the question, can we in Europe or in Japan or maybe in Mexico attract foreign or overseas investors? And then the answer was, money follows success. And that's the reason why so much money goes to California and the valley. The other thing was the aspect of the markets, and the main sentence, the agencies, the big companies, and so on, they all are investing in the upstream part of the business, but the downstream business is 10 times bigger, and we have to concentrate more money and more ideas on this field. And we don't, we in Europe or maybe in Japan or in South America, it's not a good idea to try to copy California and Silicon Valley. We have to find our own approach, our own way how we can organize this. And it's the regional aspect, as you mentioned, it's a question of speaking dialects. How can the investor, local investors, how can he organize the negotiations with the new companies? So find your own way to organize these systems. Last but not least, it's not really new. The image of space activities is too expensive, long-running, low return on investment, and so on, and so on, all these negative aspects, and the space community is too conservative and in the first way orientated to do science. That is not what investors love. We have to talk to investors, to our own companies, and even to the agencies to discuss new business and new business opportunities. And it's not only that we have to talk about with investors. We have to talk with our own big companies, because the investors say, if they don't invest in their own business, why should we do this? Okay. Professor Zott asked all participants in a final question what are the main recommendations, and you can see on this the main aspects we had discussed before. Of course, we should attract the non-space sector because it's bigger, there's more business, and so on, there's more money. And to look for closer cooperation between the space and the non-space sector. And of course, looking for non-space investors to invest in space business, and that means in the main field, invest in the downstream business. Talk about success stories, it's clear, and as I already mentioned, invest in the downstream field. And as I already mentioned, the LSIs, the large system integrators, they should be the first investors in space in the national economies. And they should not be those who wait that the others invest their money. And that the entrepreneurs have to understand who and where their customers are. And that is the fundament of all businesses. And they should know who pays the bill, and it should not be the state agency. And the final recommendation was that it is a very important job of the agencies that they have to organize these discussions. We cannot expect that the companies start to discuss it, and we are active on a very political field, and in this political business, it's the job of the agency to accompany the companies during this change process, ongoing space process. And the first step should be to discuss it with the big companies. That was a quite interesting recommendation. So, thank you very much. I enjoyed it very much.
Thank you, Dr. Gruppe. There is room for one or two questions. Seems not to be the case, so you have been complete with your summary. Then I may ask Professor Schrogel, who was leading the panel number 6 on laws and governmental actions in that field.
Yeah, thank you very much. I now have the difficult task to summarize session 6, which took place only 2 hours ago. This contains the risk, of course the risk is not so high, it's rather small, that you still remember what we talked about. So I will nevertheless try to summarize that, and maybe at least you will be surprised of how well I summarized the presentations, in particular one by Bernd Höfer, and turned it into something extremely positive about the state of space activities today. So we will see. Let's start. The summary. We had 6 presentations, started by Kathy Lüders by NASA. She was talking about the innovation policy of NASA, in particular in the field of commercial space transportation. And she also touched, and this became a theme throughout our discussion also, the regulation and legislation as one important element of the way how to shape the role of government in this field and how to provide for entrepreneurs then a good basis for their respective action. Christina Giannopapa from ESA then had a look into the innovation policy or approach by ESA, and she also prepared for you an analysis of how elements and instruments of innovation policy can be taken into the space sector and made useful instruments for actually pushing the field. And in that sense, she highlighted spin-off, spin-out, spin-together, but also the concept of key enabling technologies. Ingo Baumann then brought up, as having been invited to be the lawyer on the panel, something which turned out to be of particular relevance and importance, where nobody really would think of as a key element in the field of innovation and raising entrepreneurship, and this is public procurement. And he pointed out a number of elements how public procurement can actually become a fruitful instrument of furthering our cause. Now, we then had been moving to the regions, so to speak. Philipp Gläsener from SES presented the activities of SES, in particular in Africa. And this was, I'm sure, also something which was not really surprising, but which was eye-opening, how a company, well, SES is the market leader in the world, can, with some new push and incentive and inventiveness, try to capture a huge market which will be doubling, obviously, in the next 20 years, from 1 billion inhabitants to 2 billion inhabitants, and with an enormous growth of a part of the society which is interested in and necessarily needs telecommunications. Then you see it here, at least visually, the Deus ex machina, or better, the devil's alternative. Bernd Höfer, who provided us with a snapshot on how we also could see and have to see the space business and the space activities, pulling us a little bit out of our comfort zone, which certainly was a very good counterpoint for us also to match and to test what we have been talking about and what we have been thinking about. And he also shed light on what is happening in the Middle East, providing a very interesting perspective from an insider, because we rarely have an insider view on this area, and always just think of the myths around that. How the space sector or the space business might work and does work in this global region. We then finally had the presentation of the Director General of the Mexican Space Agency, and this also shed a light for us on how a emerging space power is shaping its policies and its strategies and its plans. And I think we heard quite often that a strategy comes first and has to be a foundation of a good and successful innovation policy and a policy for entrepreneurs. So this led to, let's say, a number of points where we could deduce concrete actions. We could not really discuss concrete actions, but we tried to get out from the presentations a number of points where I think could be generated concrete actions for all the actors which are here around this more or less large round table. So, of course, the key is to create the right environment. And this is something which has been stressed all the time. We still have to create the environment, because the environment as such is not yet there. And this has a number of reasons, from cultural to financial to legal to political, but this is the primary task. Then we can go into a few details. We also have heard that there is an international perspective. So a coordination amongst the countries and their respective understanding is necessary, their respective understanding of the factors, that there is and there are issues which are inhibiting innovation, and the difference of the respective actors have to be understood as well, in order then to take the right measures. And the right measures are certainly in reducing bureaucratic barriers, also and in particular in accessing resources. It is the alignment of programmatic, financial and regulatory frameworks with, in particular, shorter timeframes. Everything has to go faster and has to speed up. We have to enhance the involvement of investment and also include the development banks. I admit I stole this from a previous session, but I thought that in particular the investment banks and development banks, in particular the regional ones, and this is true for all global areas, should be increased and should be tapped on. Then we really have to see that we have to utilize the creative procurement. It should not be so difficult, but it has to be something where we have to inform and educate, in particular, the politicians, but also the bureaucrats. And this is a concrete action. And I think if we manage to do that, we already have done quite a bit of the job we have been tasking ourselves with. Then provide access to intellectual capital, experts, facilities, and so on. And in particular facilities, you may think of the large-scale test facilities, research facilities of ESA, of the space agencies. They certainly have to play a role in fostering entrepreneurship, and we should be more open. I say that critically to ourselves in Europe, but it is also something which well, it's not given. We can simply do it by a policy change. Then, lastly on that chart, we have to stimulate the creation of non-conventional partnerships between space and non-space. Non-space, we heard that before a few times, I think, and between private and public. A few more concrete actions, and that closes then my brief report. We have to bring closer together the scientific community with the entrepreneurs, also something where there are still worlds apart, but where both sides can certainly benefit from. We have to change the treatment of intellectual property to make it more accessible. We have to increase integrated education, also a governmental task and a task for the space agencies with their respective programs, encompassing innovation and entrepreneurship in space studies, but I should mention also in a broader sense. We have to enhance the implementation of appropriate forms of public-private partnership in sustainable ecosystems. We have to create, and this is true certainly for every country and every single country, comprehensive innovation policies which should encompass all elements on space innovation, and they should also contain explicit goals, targets, and financial instruments. And as an addition, they should be conducted and developed by and with all the relevant actors. So be inclusive in this respect. And as a very last point, this was the question raised during the panel discussion then, we should try to involve parliamentarians to provide the right political, and that's their job, the right legislative framework in order to make innovation and entrepreneurship happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Schogel, for your summary. I think you reflected it perfectly, and nobody will remember different items. But I must say, in your panel, I was particularly impressed by the presentation of the gentleman from SES, what they do in Africa. And I must say, as an ex-member of a European Space Agency, I almost felt a bit ashamed. They are doing things which actually the European Union and ESA should do to help the African countries in education, in medical services and so on. It's remarkable that a commercial company does that. I must say I was quite impressed. Are there any questions or remarks to Professor Schogel? Seems not to be the case, then thank you for your complete review. Now you get a summary of something which you certainly have not seen. Andrea Jaime Albatal was actually leading the Space Up. This was a student meeting yesterday morning, or the whole day yesterday?
On Tuesday.
Okay.
Already.
On Tuesday, excuse me. And she will give you a short summary of the major outcome and hopefully some strong recommendations to us.
Wow. Thanks, don't get too excited. Indeed, there are not really recommendations because, as I will explain, the Space Up is not a conference, it's actually an unconference. So, just to... Oh, there you go. So the Space Up was the 42nd edition of the Space Unconference. It's a worldwide known conference, or unconference actually. It started in San Diego in 2010, and it's arrived to Europe in 2012, and this is the first one in Munich. And it has been also even expanded now to India, and some people here is thinking now to do one in Singapore or even in Japan, so it's moving around. We were happy to have done the 42nd, or the number 42, because for those who are like fans of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, know that the 42 is the answer to life, universe, and everything. Unfortunately, we could not come up with the answer of everything at our Space Up, but we had a lot of fun. And indeed, what is an unconference? What did we do there? We call it an unconference because there is no structure, there is no schedule, there is no program. It's basically built up on the day by the participants. So every space up is completely different from the other. And here, although we try to a bit canalize the topic towards innovation and entrepreneurship, again, we couldn't really fully focus on that because it depends a lot on the participants and the presentations they brought into that. So that's why we call it a space and conference. So to give you some metrics, some numbers, we were 46 participants coming from 16 different countries, and actually we covered the whole world, or at least all the regions in the world. 30% female participation, so that's something that we see it's increasing, especially at the younger generations, more female. We had young professionals, students, few entrepreneurs that indeed brought this enthusiasm about entrepreneurship and innovation. But yeah, it was a very, very interesting crowd. We also used a lot social media because the purpose of the Space App is not just to stay inside the walls of a room and that's it. We want to share our ideas with the rest of the world. So, for example, we had even 1,039 impressions just in 5 hours of event. So that was also pretty good. Indeed, I said there is no schedule, there is no program, so how do we do? So on the morning, when we arrive, when we do the first presentation, we have just a panel, and that's how the program looks like. Just people come there and put Post-its whenever they want to do a presentation and about the topic they actually are interested into. So that's how our schedule looks like. But that also brings a lot of diverse and a lot of fun, because then we really talk about topics that are the interest, the real interest of the participants. So we could hear the presentations or a summary of the presentations that we heard at the Space App. So we had even an artistic proposal of doing zero-G dancing. Of course, we talked about satellite communications anarchy, a new business ideas about Metaplaneta. It's a new business that actually target this change of mindsets that we have been talking here at GLIC. And I think this new generation have this change of mindset. We even heard of a scientist that is making plasma thrusters in his garage. So really an entrepreneur, but is missing a business model there. New product development and how to finance ideas. We also heard about regulations for the new commercial human spaceflight, business, and the importance of the multidisciplinary education, which actually was also talked here at GLIC. We also heard about the public telescope, also a very innovative idea. How to finance ideas, I said. And there were some presentations on new technologies for small satellites, exploration, and even NEOs. So it was, as you can see, very diverse, but also very innovative somehow, or what the young generation is thinking or working on. But as I said, to bring more, or to focus a bit more in innovation, we proposed a debate, and it was very well moderated by Ken, so thank you very much for taking the lead in there. And we posed 3 questions. So what do you think innovation is? Which, again, has been something that here during GLIC we have been talking a lot. And 2 more questions. Does innovation stimulate investment, or does investment stimulate innovation? So we asked the participants to comment a bit about it. We didn't have much time, unfortunately, but they were getting excited. So some of the things we talked about, like innovation, what is innovation? So somebody said innovation is actually to take a step back and see another solution, or find another solution or point of view to solve a particular problem. Or creativity, or it's something new, can be an idea, can be a product, and basically something that has not been done in that way before. Some of the definitions we talked. Answering these questions on investment, what comes first, right? The investment or the innovation? So we talked that actually there are both cases. You have cases where you really need investment to keep innovating. For example, the case of the health, and doctors and scientists, people that are doing their research, and they actually need a bit of investment to keep eating and therefore keep thinking. But we also commented that there is more money than ideas. We talked about this during GLIC, so not as like this, but anyway. So we really have to work on the innovation side and then look for really fundable ideas. And then the ideas and inventions become innovation when there is an investment. So that's the way you linked investment and innovation there. But anyway, both must come together. And And even we said a sentence at the end that it was, maybe the entrepreneur is the brain and the investment is the heart. So you really need both to really survive in this environment. We also talked about financing. Again, we mentioned about why people go to ask money to government, especially in Europe, while they could go to other places. We also talked about risk and how to invest in space means take a long-term risk, and that's something that also during GLIC has been mentioned a few times. The same with the timeline, and that maybe comes to the point of our devil advocate. In the space technology, indeed, we're innovating. SpaceX is innovating by using technology for the 70s. They innovate on the business plans, on the way they do things, but technology itself, we're not very innovative yet, so we should change that. And we also strengthen the importance of collaborating with each other and networking with each other to really come up with innovation. So some of the things that we talked during the debate. This would be the recommendations or the outcomes. So since there was an event of 5 hours long, not long, we thought, okay, let's actually gather again online, virtually, and recollect all the inputs of all the participants and maybe come out with a white paper on how do we define innovation and answering these questions. Or even we thought to create a formula, a form, where we could collect inputs from all the regions in the world on how they perceive innovation and entrepreneurship. Since we were a group very international, that could bring really good inputs and most likely a good paper at the end of the day. So we also mentioned, I don't know if you're aware of the startup weekend. So we thought, okay, it was really fun, but we need something else. So there is in Munich the community. So let's really do something a bit more like with really a product at the end. So why not to organize a startup weekend in Munich? So if anybody here is in the Munich area and would like to join this venture, we are thinking to maybe organize a startup weekend for the end of the year or next year. We'll see. And thanks to the IAF, we gave a scholarship to one of the participants, to the MVP of the Space Hub, to attend IAC in Jerusalem. He did really a good presentation. He was very participative because at the end of the day, that's what we want at the Space Hub. So that's really good. We will have somebody attending IAC in Jerusalem, covered by kind of the profit of this non-profit event. And yeah, hopefully to bring the ideas of the entrepreneurship innovation to the IAC, which sometimes misses a bit of this topic there. And also thank my fellow colleagues that also helped me organize, Luis, Klaas, and Martin. Unfortunately, they cannot be here, but we all worked, we had a lot of fun. And of course, the IAF, especially Julia and Isabella, by the way, happy birthday, Isabella. DLR, ASE as our sponsors, and our partners, ISA, SGSC, and the ministry, because they really supported the event and they promoted this. So thank you very much for all you did for us. Yeah, thank you.
So thank you very much for your presentation. We are now coming to the end of this concluding session, and I wanted to address some words to you. I see many young people here. They were not yet born when I was already in space activities. I was 19 years in industry in space activities, then 21 years in ESA. And since 8 years, I'm advisor to governments and industrial companies and agencies. So, and I just mentioned this because I have seen some phases of space activity. In the first phase, this was the phase of enabling technologies. There we developed launchers and first satellites and so on. And in the second phase, it was the first phase of use already of satellite services, especially in the telecom and in the meteorology area, which is still a very strong arena. But the downstream activity is concentrated on a few major actors. And then I think we have heard a lot about the valley of death yesterday and today. Fortunately, we have not gone through the valley of death, but we have gone after the second phase a little bit through a valley of depression. And I must say, I'm very happy that now we are back on track. And I think one cannot appreciate that enough, that our American friends, they are responsible for that revival. I think the NASA initiative on the commercial transportation system, the so-called new space, which is now ongoing in the United States, they have really led to something new. And also the concentration of Mr. Obama's programs on applications, they have certainly helped a lot to bring things forward and to create a certain revival in space. And this we have also seen in Europe, and we are now, in my opinion, going into a next phase. And this is the phase of, in particular, navigation and Earth observation as application programs. And if I can have the slide. And I think I derive from that revival some actions which I think, or recommendations which I do on a personal basis. I'm not summarizing anything of the panel, but I'm summarizing just my own opinion. And you heard from Mr. Schogel about the Advocatus Diaboli, Mr. Höfer, and he has made a nice definition of innovation. He has said, science and technology turns money into knowledge. Fine. And then innovation turns knowledge into money, especially into business money. And I must say, we are very good in the first phase to turn money into science and technology. But on the second phase, on the second part of his definition, to turn then science and technology into business money, there we are rather weak, and there we have to do much more. And in contrast to the telecom industry, where the downstream players are big organizations, I think in Earth observation and in navigation we will have small players. We will have big ones also, but we will have thousands or hundreds of thousands of small players turning these opportunities into services. And therefore I think it is time, and that is my recommendation, that governments should intensify their efforts in facilitating and supporting entrepreneurship in more general terms. I spoke to you in the last days about this 100 million euro initiative of the ministry I am working for. That is one step, but I think what we need is much more encouraging and facilitating possibilities for young entrepreneurs. And if I mean young, I'm also counting as a young entrepreneur. I mean young in mind and not young in age. And I think what should also do the space agencies, and I have to correct it a little bit, it is also agencies. It is also, for instance, the GSA, the agency dealing with downstream activities. The universities and the incubators should, in my opinion, drastically increase their support to broaden applications, in particular for new enterprises. And last but not least, an element which we were so far entirely missing, the space industry should make available their know-how and industrial property rights for entrepreneurs. And I think if these three players, governments, agencies and industry, are working together and put all their efforts and their results together in order to support entrepreneurship, then I think we can expect from these new elements, Earth observation and navigation, a lot of benefit for the broad public. And therefore I think, and this concludes my speech, I think that taking all together the conference here, and I was personally very excited about the panels, about the audience, about ERF, and all the players which have made this conference a success. And I think the subject itself is interesting enough to maybe facilitate the entrepreneurship dialogue also in the future by future conferences or the like. Maybe at the IAC something can be done, or as I mentioned here, a GLIC 2000X or any other format could be a good continuation of this first dialogue, because we have many more things to be discussed and many more things which are interesting for all of us. In this spirit, I thank all of you, in particular Mr. Higuchi, the IRF president, and Dr. Feichtinger and his team, and all the panelists and moderators and the audience for their presence, and I wish you all the success with entrepreneurship in the future. Thank you very much. Mr. Higuchi will now address to you. Just a moment.
He already summarized everything, and then I just follow his recommendation. Before I tell you the official message, closing remarks, I'd like to respond to your recommendation as IAF. So we have to discuss and plan another conference about the innovation. Then that's our IAF action item from this conference. Thank you very much. Then, and I have to just conceiving the mottos of the IAF is connecting space people. Then I noticed this is wrong. Connecting people, whatever space people or non-space people. We have to connect people through space activity, probably. We have to change the motto. Then, let me send my official closing remarks. Distinguished moderators, speakers, panelists, and participants, and distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. 3 days after the opening of this conference, over which I had the honor and pleasure of being part of, we are about to close a meeting which I hope has fully lived up to the expectation of us all. We saw in this occasion an unparalleled opportunity to strengthen the ties between young, or not only the young, fresh-minded people and entrepreneurs, and between those who in their countries have the power of decision over youth, innovation, and entrepreneurial policies. We now have the feeling that our expectations were not in vain. We have had the opportunity to share experiences and to listen to committed voice. But above all, we have had the opportunity to observe the clear political desire that innovation is a key source of the economic growth, especially space-related technologies. Therefore, young and fresh ideas should be players in a process that concerns them so deeply, and we should be able to promote and integrate their legitimate hopes and ideas in the fields we have spoken of so much here. The result of the recommendation session we have just had is a decisive step for future actions. It is necessary for all of us, organizations, states, agencies, youth organizations, to work together to put into practice the wealth of the commitment and the actions we have just conceived. I'd like to thank you for your presence here in Munich, in particular the co-organizers, the Bavarian Ministry of Economic Affairs and Media, Energy and Technology, the German Aerospace Center, and the European Space Agency. The IPC co-chairs, Mr. Jörg Feuchtelbüchel, Dr. Gerd Gruppe, Professor Hans-Jörg Ditters, Mr. Frank Zaltzgaber, and Mr. Ken Davidian. And the organized committee members, Ms. Andrea Booth, Dr. Karl-Heinz Kreuzberg, and Peter Zeig, and Dr. Christian Hochtinger. Last but not no means least, the IF Secretariat for your work, your patience and your help, without which it would not have been possible for this conference to be the success that we all recognize. In closing, I'd like to talk about one of my dreams related to this conference. About 40 years ago, Apollo program ended when I studied at MIT. We at MIT discussed to make more attractive and aggressive program than Apollo. Now, we have constructed ISS, International Space Station, and operating it successfully. So I hope entrepreneurs and fresh-minded people here will create and implement more attractive and aggressive endeavors than ISS with National Space Agency or without them. As Dr. Hofer told us at panel 6, our future is not what we predict, but what we create. Thank you very much, and see you in Jerusalem.